Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Chief Adamma Bekare was renowned across the bustling city of Lusaka Falls for his immense wealth and business acumen. In a modern African landscape that merged the cosmopolitan skyline with deep cultural roots, he stood out not only for his financial empire but also for his philanthropic efforts. His fortune, which sprawled across real estate, telecommunications, and microfinance enterprises, was the stuff of legends. Reporters wrote glowing articles about the sleek Bekare Tower that pierced the sky in the city center, while socialites whispered about his extravagant lifestyle, expensive cars, exclusive soirees, and top-tier security wherever he went. Yet, behind this polished public image, Chief Adamma possessed a sharp mind that was always testing the loyalty of those around him. Despite his outward kindness, there had always been an edge to the man. He was someone who believed that wealth created false friendships and cunning enemies. Born in a modest household in the inland region of Northern Rivers, Chief Adamma had labored tirelessly, climbing the social and financial ladder through persistence and shrewd decision-making. He learned early on that everyone had a price, and the people he employed or called his friends could turn on him if they saw enough incentive. It was this worldview that shaped how he treated his employees, always cordial but always watchful. Among those closest to him was his personal butler, Tund Mbeki, a reserved middle-aged man known for his meticulous attention to detail and unwavering dedication. Unlike many of the staff members who rotated through the chief's grand mansion over the years, Tund's stay had been enduring. He had served Chief Adamma for nearly 10 years and had witnessed the best and worst of his employer. From organizing the flamboyant birthday parties that dazzled the city's elite to the quiet nights when the chief brooded over business setbacks, Tund remained the silent observer and ever-ready assistant. Tund was a man shaped by personal struggles. He grew up in a one-room apartment in a densely populated district on the outskirts of Lusaka Falls. His widowed mother sold akra, bean cakes, by the roadside, and the meager proceeds she made barely fed them. Tund, forced to drop out of secondary school due to financial constraints, found work in various domestic roles, saving up every coin to support his mother and younger siblings. Over time, his dedication and honesty caught the eye of a neighbor who recommended him for a butler's position in the city's highbrow district. Through a chain of references, he ended up at Chief Adamma's mansion, beginning a decade of faithful service. To many of the mansion's staff, Tund appeared as a simple man whose personal life was marked by duty. He rarely attended social gatherings unless they were obligatory staff events. He dressed simply and spoke in a humble tone, exemplifying that perfect African butler archetype that many of his wealthy employers sought. Yet Tund harbored ambitions, like any other man. He dreamed of owning a small guest house someday and maybe, just maybe, furthering his education. But for now, his identity revolved around being the chief's loyal retainer. One sunny afternoon, after a board meeting at Bekare Tower, Chief Adamma summoned Tund to his private study. The room itself was a testament to the chief's success, featuring mahogany shelves laden with business books, international awards, and African artifacts. Light filtered through high windows, illuminating the expensive Persian rug at the center. Tund stood by the door, his hands clasped respectfully in front of him, awaiting instructions. Chief Adamma cleared his throat. "Tund," he began in a measured tone, "I'll be traveling to the next city for a few days to finalize some business deals. During my absence, I need you to oversee the mansion's operations." Tund bowed slightly, a posture of respect. "Yes, Chief. The staff will each have their tasks. You already know yours," the chief continued, his probing gaze meeting Tund's eyes. "However, I have a special assignment for you. There's a suitcase I'll place in your home, your personal home, not the quarters here. It contains some essential documents and a few valuables. You are to keep it safe until I return." A flicker of surprise crossed Tund's face, but he quickly composed himself. "Of course, Chief. I will guard it with my life." "Good." Chief Adamma looked satisfied, though there was something quietly piercing in his expression. "You may go." Tun's mind buzzed as he left the study. Why would the chief leave something so valuable in his modest house when the mansion itself had a fortified safe and round-the-clock armed security? He couldn't comprehend it. Still, Tund never questioned a direct instruction. It was one of the reasons he had lasted so long in the chief's service. If his employer wanted the suitcase at Tund's humble apartment, then so be it. That same evening, an unmarked vehicle arrived at Tund's one-bedroom bungalow in the older suburb of Redwood Hills. Two security men, dressed in black suits, carried the heavy suitcase inside. Tund signed a receipt for it, feeling a rush of nerves. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of valuables were stored within. The weight suggested something more than just documents. Perhaps the chief's diamonds? Or sensitive contracts for his new investment deals. Although Tund's curiosity burned, he dared not open it without permission. He carefully placed the suitcase under the foldable bed in his living room. The metal edges looked sturdy, and it bore a single padlock sealed with a code. He also noticed the chief's personal insignia on one corner, a stylized letter, entwined with an image of a lion's head. It was the hallmark of the Betrayal brand, stamped on all high-value items the chief owned. Over a simple dinner of yam porridge, Tund's wife, Zainab, asked him about the briefcase. She had just returned from her small hair-braiding shop in the adjacent neighborhood. Tund explained that it belonged to the chief and he was merely safeguarding it. Zainab's eyebrows shot up with concern. "That's a lot of responsibility, Tund. Do you think we'll be safe keeping such a thing here?" Tund sighed. "I don't know, but we must trust the chief's judgment. We'll keep the door locked at all times. I'll inform the local vigilante group to do extra patrols around our street." In the days that followed, Tund maintained a vigilant watch over the suitcase. He woke early to perform his chores at the mansion, from polishing the chief's silverware to coordinating deliveries, and then he rushed home to ensure nothing was amiss. At night, he slept lightly, listening for any suspicious noises. The burden of responsibility weighed heavily on his mind, but he was determined to prove himself worthy of Chief Adamma's trust. Yet little did Tund realize that this assignment was more than just a security job. It was a test. Chief Adamma had planned it with intricate detail, suspecting that even the most loyal of servants could be tempted by the allure of wealth. $1 million in cash was stashed inside that very suitcase, placed there not only to test Tund's honesty but also to bait any hidden opportunists. As Tund carried on with life, entirely unaware of the money within, the fuse of a grand scheme was lit, setting in motion events that would change both his and Chief Adamma's lives forever. The test had begun, and neither man could predict the cataclysmic tragedy that awaited them at the end of this seemingly straightforward assignment. When Chief Adamma left town the next morning, the mansion felt emptier despite the bustle of the staff. The chef, housekeepers, gardeners, and security detail continued their routines, but without the chief's commanding presence, the air of urgency dissolved. Tund approached his duties with the same diligence he always had, taking special care to double-check the housekeeping schedules and the inventory logs, ensuring no detail was overlooked in his employer's absence. As the day progressed, Tund's thoughts wandered often to the suitcase in his bungalow. He could not shake the feeling of responsibility and curiosity. The knowledge that the chief had entrusted him with something potentially priceless sent a swirl of unease through his mind. Yet Tund firmly believed that a good butler never breached the trust of his master. After all, loyalty was the currency of their relationship, and Tund had every intention of remaining steadfast. That afternoon, while Tund was polishing cutlery in the mansion's main dining hall, a colleague named Kwesi struck up a conversation. Kwesi served as one of the personal drivers and had a habit of prying into people's affairs under the guise of friendly chatter. Leaning over, he said, "So, Tund, I heard Chief left you with some special package. He told me you wouldn't be able to drive him for a few days because you're focusing on his new assignment." Tund tried to keep his face impassive. "Yes, Kwesi, just a few things to oversee. Nothing too special really." Kwesi mused, glancing at the gleaming knives Tund was laying out. "You must be real important to him for that kind of trust. I've never seen him leave personal valuables anywhere outside this mansion." Feeling a prickle of unease, Tund changed the subject quickly, asking about Kwesi's family and deflecting attention away from the suitcase. While Tund was generally amiable, he guarded private matters carefully, especially those concerning the chief's instructions. Nonetheless, he couldn't ignore the gravity of Kwesi's remarks. If Kwesi knew about the suitcase, perhaps others did too. Rumors could travel swiftly among staff, and some might not have the best intentions. By the time Tund returned home that evening, he was on high alert. Redwood Hills was typically a peaceful suburb, but on occasion, petty thefts and break-ins occurred. With the chief's rumored valuables in his possession, Tund felt like a magnet for trouble. As he parked his old, rattling sedan in front of the bungalow, he could see that Zainab was still up, the glow of light visible through the living room's threadbare curtains. Inside, the room was filled with a comforting aroma of jollof rice. Zainab had made dinner, though her face carried a hint of worry. She'd heard from a neighbor that two men in black suits were seen dropping off a big metal box several nights ago. In their community, any unusual activity invited curiosity and speculation. "They're all talking about it," Zainab informed Tund, setting a plate of food before him. "They're guessing you've come into some fortune, or you're hiding something illegal." I tried not to feed the gossip, but you know how people are. Tund nodded solemnly. "We have to be careful. If the chief left something of value, I don't want any prying eyes thinking they can target us." Despite their precautions, Tund sensed a creeping tension settle over the house. Each night, he made sure the doors were double-locked and that the only window in the living room was securely latched. He informed his local vigilante group to patrol more often, telling them that, "I'm looking after something important for my boss." The patrollers nodded, though Tund could see their own curiosity mirrored in their eyes. In Redwood Hills, wealth was not common, and the possibility of a large stash of money or valuables nearby was enough to stir dangerous thoughts. Throughout this period, Tund remained blissfully unaware of the real contents of the suitcase. Chief Adamma had intended for the test to be thorough. Tund was never told explicitly about the $1 million inside. Each day that passed without Tund trying to open it was a point in his favor. But it also made the suitcase a silent beacon for opportunistic criminals. Rumors swirling among the staff and neighbors meant the test was no longer just a personal measure of Tund's honesty, it was now a potential security risk to them all. The butler's usual calm exterior started to crack under the pressure. He became jumpy at night, waking at the slightest sound outside. Zainab did her best to assure him that it was just stray cats rummaging through trash cans or the wind whistling through the alley. But Tund's gut told him trouble was looming. He found himself scanning the faces of neighbors, watching for anything suspicious. A stranger lurking near the corner store, a tinted vehicle he hadn't seen before passing by more than once, or random visitors knocking on doors late in the evening. Meanwhile, in a luxury hotel in Mabube City, Chief Adamma proceeded with his business deals. After lengthy negotiations on prospective telecommunication expansions, he took a break in his suite to review security updates from home. One of his private investigators informed him that rumors about the suitcase were indeed spreading among his staff and in Tund's neighborhood. Chief Adamma smiled, though it was not one of joy but calculation. In his mind, this was all part of the test, watching how Tund handled suspicion, whether he'd succumb to greed, or if he'd fail to protect it from outside threats. In truth, the chief's worldview had grown cynical over the years. He believed everyone possessed hidden desires that money could unleash. Even Tund, the humble butler whom he considered the most loyal of all staff, was not exempt from suspicion. For Chief Adamma, the real question was not if Tund could be corrupted, but how quickly. Or, if by some fluke, Tund would remain incorruptible and inadvertently expose criminals who might attempt to claim the valuables for themselves. Back in Lusaka Falls, as Tund finished his dinner, he heard the faint sound of hushed voices outside his bungalow window. He stood up, heart hammering. Creeping cautiously to the window, he peeked out. Two silhouettes lingered by the roadside, their low chatter inaudible. After a moment, they strode away, leaving Tund uncertain whether they were mere passers-by or men scouting his home. Zainab noticed his clenched jaw and tried to comfort him, but Tund could not dispel the disquiet in his mind. The next morning, Tund resolved to double down on security. He arranged to meet with the local vigilantes, offering a small monthly payment for extra surveillance around his bungalow. They agreed, but Tun's meager savings were already stretched thin. He only hoped that this arrangement would deter any would-be thieves. For a moment, he contemplated calling Chief Adamma to inform him of the suspicious activities, but he quickly reconsidered. The chief had entrusted him with a responsibility, and Tund worried that any complaint might be seen as weakness or incompetence. He was determined to handle it on his own. Little did Tund know, a series of events, perhaps orchestrated by fate or by a cunning mind, would soon converge on Redwood Hills. The stage was set, and all the players were in position. The butler's loyalty was about to be tested far beyond his imagination, leading him into a tragedy no one foresaw, with consequences no one could reverse. Days turned into a week, and Chief Adamma had yet to return to Lusaka Falls. Tun's anxiety grew, though he kept up a dignified front for the staff and for Zainab. During daylight hours, when he busied himself at the mansion, he felt a semblance of normalcy. Polishing the antique candlesticks, inspecting the storerooms for any missing groceries, and ensuring the front garden's palm fronds were trimmed, these mundane tasks provided a temporary escape from the gnawing worry about the mysterious suitcase in his bungalow. Each time Tund returned home, he noticed small changes in the neighborhood. Perhaps a neighbor's front door that used to be wide open was now firmly shut, or a group of idle youths loitered near the corner store longer than usual. Occasionally, he spotted glances cast in his direction, as though people suspected him of newfound wealth. Whispers circulated that Tund had struck gold, or worse, was hiding something illegally for his boss. Rumors in Redwood Hills needed no feeding. They thrived on the mere scent of the unusual. One afternoon, as Tund was concluding his tasks at the mansion, he received a phone call from an unknown number. He answered carefully, his voice hushed as he stepped into a quieter corridor. "Tund Mbeki?" a low voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" Tund replied. "You need to be careful. People are asking questions about what you keep in your house." The line went dead before he could press for more information. Tund felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. The call could have been a warning or an attempt at intimidation. It could also have been a hoax by someone from the neighborhood, or even the staff, wanting to rattle him. Regardless, Tund's sense of foreboding worsened. He finished his duties in a hurry and rushed home. That evening, over a modest dinner, Tund shared the incident with Zainab. Concern etched her brow. "We can't keep living like this, Tund. Maybe we should stay at your mother's place for a few days until the chief returns." Tund shook his head. "I can't. If something happens to that suitcase, I'll be blamed. I have to protect it." The weight of responsibility settled between them. Zainab's eyes glistened with worry, but she respected her husband's decision. She understood his loyalty, even if she feared the potential dangers that lurked in the shadows. 2 days later, Tund caught a disturbing sight on his way to work, a black SUV parked near the end of his street. He couldn't see the driver through the tinted windows, but he noticed it didn't carry a local license plate. When he drove off, the SUV followed at a distance before veering off into a side road. Instinct told him this was not a coincidence. Tund clenched the steering wheel, fighting the urge to accelerate. Panic wouldn't help. He needed to stay calm and observant. Upon arriving at the mansion, Tund considered telling the head of security, a stoic former police officer named Captain Zhao. But would that betray the chief's trust or reveal too much about the suitcase? In the end, Tund decided to approach Captain Zhao, albeit with caution. He told him about suspicious men in his neighborhood, without mentioning the suitcase. The captain listened intently, nodding in places, and then assured Tund they would discreetly check the area. Later that same day, while Tund was serving a light lunch to the mansion's senior staff, he overheard a heated conversation between Kwesi the driver and Musa, one of the gardeners. They were discussing the big prize that lay somewhere in Redwood Hills. Kwesi boasted in a hushed tone that if a man is smart, he can secure his future, adding that loyalty doesn't pay in times like these. Musa, equally intrigued, seemed to hang on every word, eyes shining with curiosity. Tund's chest tightened. It was clear some staff members knew or suspected that the chief's valuables were kept in Tund's home. The real question was how far they would go to get it. He recalled how Kwesi had once been reprimanded for siphoning fuel from the chief's car. The man had a record of opportunistic behavior. Though Tund tried to keep a level head, the possibility that Kwesi might be conspiring, or even bragging about targeting the suitcase, terrified him. Unable to concentrate on his tasks, Tund slipped away to the secluded courtyard behind the mansion. The courtyard was an oasis of calm, adorned with hibiscus flowers and a small fountain with carved African masks. Sitting on a stone bench, Tund buried his face in his hands, wrestling with fear and uncertainty. He silently prayed for the chief's quick return. This test of loyalty was becoming a test of survival, though Tund still did not fully grasp the magnitude of the threat. As twilight approached, Tund left for home more nervously than usual. The tinted SUV was absent from the street, but a different car, a battered sedan, idled across from his bungalow. Two men stood by it, smoking cigarettes. Tund lingered in his car, watching them from a distance. After a few minutes, they got in and drove off, leaving Tund to wonder if they had been waiting for him or if it was merely a coincidence. Zainab met him at the door, whispering urgently, "Some men came by asking for you. They claim to be your friends from an old job. I've never seen them before." A chill shot through Tund's veins. "What did you tell them?" "I said you were still at work and wouldn't be back until later." "They looked suspicious, Tund." Tund embraced her, wishing he could shield her from all of this. He peered around the room, verifying that the suitcase was still under the foldable bed, untouched. His heart pounded as he spotted footprints on the floor near the bed, unmistakable shoe prints in the dust. Someone had tried to move it. The padlock, thankfully, was intact, but the sense of violation was overwhelming. A quiet fury mixed with fear rose within him. This was no mere curiosity from neighbors. Someone had the nerve to break into his house, rummage around, and then leave. Grabbing a rag, Tund wiped away the footprints, mindful that they might also be evidence. He felt torn. Contacting the police could attract even more unwanted attention and possibly tip off the chief's adversaries that something truly valuable was here. Yet doing nothing left them vulnerable. Zainab stood by him, wide-eyed. "Tund, we need to get out of here. This isn't safe anymore." He nodded slowly, but his mind reeled with internal conflict. If he fled, he would abandon the suitcase and fail the chief. If he stayed, he would risk their lives. The butler, who had once operated in a structured world of cleaning schedules and polite bows, now found himself in a labyrinth of threats, deceit, and danger. He had no idea that tragedy was inching closer with every passing moment, orchestrated by forces he could not fully see or control. Meanwhile, Chief Adamma's test continued, turning Tund's life into a high-stakes game where the final hand was about to be dealt with deadly consequences. Desperation grew with each passing day. Tund took the restlessness swirling inside him and tried to channel it into vigilance, but the tension at home was palpable. He urged Zainab to stay indoors as much as possible and cautioned her to call him immediately if she noticed anything suspicious. In turn, she quietly arranged for a trusted cousin, Idiot, to come and stay with her whenever Tund was out. Though their bungalow was small, an extra pair of watchful eyes offered some reassurance. At the mansion, Tund's demeanor became more guarded. He spoke little and observed everything. He noticed that Kwesi was often huddled with two other staff, Musa the gardener and Bassi, a housekeeper who sometimes doubled as an errand boy. Whenever Tund passed by them, their conversation would abruptly halt, and they'd flash uneasy smiles. Captain Zhao, the chief of security, also seemed more alert than usual, making discreet rounds around the mansion's perimeter. It was on one of these rounds that Tund gathered the courage to confide his suspicions in Captain Zhao. Standing beside a high concrete fence, shielded from the rest of the staff, Tund explained how unknown men had come looking for him, possibly broken into his house, and how rumors were swirling about a big prize hidden somewhere in Redwood Hills. Captain Zhao listened intently, a deep furrow creasing his brow. "Have you considered that it might be something more than valuables?" he asked, gazing at Tund with a steady, measured look. "The chief deals in high-stakes business. Could it be that this is about leverage, documents criminals want to get their hands on? I've known of such cases before." Tund swallowed hard, uncertain of how much to reveal. "I'm not sure. The chief only said it was important. I've never opened it." The security head gave a slight nod. It might be best to move that suitcase to a safer location or call the chief immediately. This is beyond the scope of normal household concerns. Yet, Tund hesitated. He worried about defying the chief's explicit instructions. Despite the danger, he felt duty-bound to follow his master's orders. He didn't want to appear incompetent or disloyal. So, he shook his head. I can't. I'll keep watch until the chief returns. Captain Jal sighed. Suit yourself, Tund, but be careful. Rumors can be like wildfire, especially in this city. The next thing you know, half the underworld is after whatever's in that suitcase. I'll do what I can here, but I can't place men around your house without the chief's authorization. Over the next few days, Tund took extra precautions. He changed his routine, leaving the mansion at different times, sometimes driving an alternate route home to see if anyone followed. He kept his phone in hand, ready to call for help if needed. Zainab continued her quiet watch at the bungalow, with Idiyat keeping her company. Still, a sense of impending doom lurked in every shadow. One evening, Tund and Zainab were startled by a loud banging on the door. Heart racing, Tund grabbed a heavy flashlight and approached cautiously. Who is it? He called out. Open up. It's the vigilante group, came a gruff voice. Tund unlocked the door to find 3 members of the local vigilante group standing on the porch, each armed with a baton or a cudgel. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, announced they'd received a report that suspicious men were spotted loitering around Tund's bungalow. They ran off before we could catch them, the man added, stepping inside warily. It's like they were casing your house? Tund thanked them profusely, offering them bottled water. The vigilantes insisted on inspecting his home to ensure everything was in order. Though Tund was hesitant, he recognized their help was crucial, so he allowed them in. They found nothing amiss inside. The suitcase remained where it was, locked tight. Yet the look on the scarred man's face suggested curiosity. This is the only thing of value here? He asked, cocking his head toward the modest furniture. Tund nodded, trying to appear casual. The vigilantes eventually left, but Tund sensed their skepticism. Even they seemed to suspect something bigger was hidden in the bungalow. That night, while Zainab slept fitfully, Tund lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts roamed from the dusty corners of Redwood Hills to the sleek corridors of the mansion, then to the unknown city where Chief Adamma was currently engaged in high-stakes negotiations. A small part of him began to resent the chief for thrusting him into this predicament. Was this truly necessary? Did the chief trust him so little that he needed to conduct such an elaborate test? More pressing than Tund's moral dilemmas was a single, urgent question. Who were these men lurking around his home? Were they staff from the mansion hoping to get rich quick? Or were they criminals from outside who had caught wind of the rumor? Fear wrestled with anger in Tund's mind. He wanted to protect Zainab, to keep her safe from harm, but also to remain loyal to the chief. It felt like an impossible balancing act. Meanwhile, across town, hidden figures were indeed plotting. Kwesi, Bassi, and Musa had huddled together in a dingy local bar that reeked of stale beer and cheap cigarettes. The bar's flickering neon sign read Paradise Joint, an ironic name for a place that often hosted shady deals. Over several rounds of drinks, the 3 men discussed their plan: how to gain entry into Tund's house, how to either bribe or scare him into cooperation, and what to do once they obtained the prized suitcase. We split the loot, Kwesi declared, leaning forward. But keep it quiet. If the chief finds out, we're done for. We'll vanish from the city before he returns. Musa, usually mild-mannered around the mansion, revealed a darker edge. Yes, but if Tund resists, we'll have to handle him. At least scare him enough so he doesn't talk. Bassi snorted, swirling the remaining beer in his glass. We need more than threats. That man's loyal to the bone. We might need a bigger approach, some muscle from outside. A grim hush settled between them. They knew the risks. Chief Adamma's power and connections spanned beyond just the mansion. If they were caught, prison would be a relief compared to what the chief might do. But desperation and greed are potent motivators. Rumor had it that the suitcase might contain a fortune in cash or even precious gems. The potential reward outweighed the risks in their eyes. None of them suspected that the suitcase actually contained a cool $1 million. They only knew it was rumored to be worth enough to change a man's life. And with their low-paying jobs, the temptation of easy wealth was too strong to resist. As the trio sealed their conspiracy with a final toast, Tund lay awake in his bungalow, ignorant of how close the threat truly was. Unbeknownst to him, the test was no longer just a private assessment of his character. It had escalated into a looming confrontation that could turn violent at any moment. What no one foresaw was how this confrontation would spiral out of control and lead to a tragedy that would cast a dark shadow over them all. The night of the break-in arrived under a cloak of oppressive silence. A moonless sky hung over Redwood Hills, and most of the neighborhood had turned in early for the night. Tund and Zainab sat in their living room, the only source of light being a small table lamp that flickered occasionally due to erratic power supply. Tund was on edge. He had told Zainab that he suspected some staff members from the mansion were involved in the strange occurrences around their home. They had considered going elsewhere for the night, but Tund felt rooted by his sense of duty and worry. Zainab, unwilling to leave him alone, stood by his side, her face tight with apprehension. Shortly after midnight, faint sounds disturbed the stillness, a muffled shuffle on the gravel outside. Tund froze, switching off the table lamp to plunge the living room into darkness. "Zainab, stay behind me," he whispered, his heart hammering so loudly he feared it would betray their presence. A low creaking noise came from the back window, the one in their tiny kitchen. Tund crept towards it, flashlight in hand, though he dared not switch it on. Without warning, the window shattered. Shards of glass clattered onto the linoleum floor, followed by a figure dressed in dark clothing, face obscured by a black scarf. A second figure followed, their footsteps crunching on the broken glass. Tund's mind screamed danger. He turned to Zainab, motioning for her to hide. "Where is it?" hissed the first intruder, rummaging through the narrow kitchen shelves and overturning plates in search of the suitcase. The voice was low, but Tund thought it sounded vaguely familiar. Summoning what courage he had, Tund switched on his flashlight and shone it directly at them. "Get out of my house. There's nothing here for you." His voice trembled despite the bravado. The second intruder lunged, and Tund swung the flashlight. It connected with the intruder's shoulder, eliciting a grunt of pain. But the first intruder reacted quickly, pulling Tund into a tight hold. A brief struggle ensued, and Tund felt a fist slam into his abdomen, doubling him over. Stars danced in his vision as he slumped to the floor, gasping for breath. Zainab screamed from somewhere behind him, and the second intruder rushed toward the living room. A streak of moonlight from a gap in the curtains revealed the intruder's face for a split second. Tund recognized Musa's distinct features. This was no random burglar. It was indeed one of the mansion's staff. Panic flooded him. If Musa was here, it meant the others might be as well. "Find that suitcase," growled Musa, his voice rasping with urgency. In the chaos, Tund mustered enough energy to scramble to his feet. He saw the first intruder, likely Kwesi by the build, rifling through the living room corners. The sofa cushions were tossed aside, and a small cabinet by the TV was knocked over. Tund lunged, trying to protect the bedroom door. That's where the suitcase was hidden. But Kwesi barreled into him, sending him crashing into a wooden dining chair, splintering it under his weight. Zainab tried to hide in the bedroom, but the door was forced open. Another figure, probably Bassi, pinned her against the wall. The men seemed desperate, as though they had staked everything on retrieving whatever treasure they believed was in that suitcase. Tund yelled, "Leave her alone. I'll show you where it is." The words tasted bitter in his mouth, but he was willing to concede anything to keep Zainab safe. Satisfied, Musa motioned for Bassi to release Zainab. "Where?" he barked, eyes darting around the dimly lit bedroom. Tund pointed under the foldable bed, and Bassi yanked it aside to reveal the suitcase. A triumphant gleam lit Bassi's eyes. With trembling hands, he started fumbling with the lock, only to realize he didn't know the combination. "Open it," he ordered Tund. "I don't know the code," Tund replied, voice shaking. "The chief never gave it to me." For a moment, uncertainty flickered among the intruders. They'd assumed Tund was in on the entire thing, or at least that he knew how to open it. Rage replaced confusion, and Kwesi snarled. If you're lying to us, you're finished. The men turned frantic, rummaging through the bedroom drawers, tearing open closets, possibly searching for a key. Tund crouched on the floor, shielding Zainab behind him, his mind racing for a way out. Just then, a bright flashlight pierced the darkness from the shattered window. "Police! Freeze!" a booming voice commanded. Panic exploded among the intruders. Kwesi grabbed the suitcase and attempted to bolt through the kitchen. Musa hesitated, casting a fearful glance at Tund and Zainab. Bassi made a desperate rush towards the back door. One of the police officers, apparently alerted by neighbors or the vigilant group's patrols, fired a warning shot. The gunshot reverberated in the cramped bungalow, causing Tund to flinch, ears ringing. Chaos broke loose. Kwesi, still holding the suitcase, stumbled over the broken kitchenware, cursing under his breath. Another shot rang out, and Bassi's scream sliced through the air. Tund tried to shield Zainab, pushing her against the wall. The police officers stormed in, and the living room erupted into a dizzying melee of shouting, scuffling feet and crackling police radios. By the time the dust settled, Bassi lay on the floor, blood pooling beneath him from a wound in his side. Musa, hands raised, dropped to his knees, trembling. Kwesi, battered and disoriented, clung to the suitcase. The police disarmed them, barking orders to lie flat. Tund and Zainab huddled in a corner, shaken but alive. In the aftermath, paramedics were called, neighbors peered from windows, and the hush of Redwood Hills was replaced by wailing sirens. Bassi was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Kwesi and Musa were handcuffed, led away to waiting police vans. As Tund watched them go, a crushing sense of relief and guilt washed over him. People he knew, men he greeted daily at the mansion, had turned into home invaders. And it was all for a locked suitcase whose true contents Tund still did not fully know. But the tragedy was not yet complete. Unbeknownst to them, a phone call was about to be made to Chief Adamma, informing him of the night's events. That call would set in motion the final chapter of this twisted tale, culminating in a shocking revelation that would shake Tund to his core and leave a trail of irreversible sorrow in its wake. Sunrise broke over Lusaka Falls with the news headlines ablaze. Botched robbery at Butler's home. 2 arrested, 1 in critical condition. Journalists speculated about the contents of the locked suitcase the intruders had tried to steal. The buzz around Redwood Hills was deafening. Everyone had an opinion. Some believed it was cash, others insisted it was evidence of the chief's murky dealings. A few romanticized it as a stash of jewels, fit for an African king. Tund, however, knew only one thing for certain. The chief had entrusted him with something extremely valuable, and that trust had nearly cost him and Zainab their lives. Exhausted and still reeling from the break-in, Tund crouched on the tattered sofa in his living room. Shards of glass lay everywhere. The window was boarded up with old plywood, and the place looked ransacked. Zainab gently dabbed at the cuts on his forehead, tears shimmering in her eyes. "We can't stay here anymore," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "This is too dangerous, Tund." Before he could respond, a police inspector knocked on the door. He had more questions. Tund spent the next 2 hours giving statements, recounting every detail of the harrowing night. Meanwhile, an ambulance siren whined in the distance as it passed by, likely heading to another emergency. Tund's nerves felt raw, the weight of everything pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. By mid-morning, Captain Jal arrived, accompanied by 2 other security personnel from the mansion. The men helped Tund and Zainab bag up the shattered glass and straighten out the living room as best they could. Captain Jal's usually stern face bore a look of sympathy. "I wish you had told me more," he said quietly, assisting Tund in hauling away broken furniture pieces. "We could have prevented this." Tund sighed, turning the suitcase's padlock over in his hands. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't want the chief to think I was weak or incompetent." Captain Jal patted him on the shoulder. "The chief is on his way back. He'll be here by nightfall. We'll place some security around your home until then." Despite this reassurance, Tund felt no relief. The police had confiscated the suitcase briefly for their investigation, but it was still locked, and they found no immediate way to open it. With no official charges against Tund, the suitcase was returned to him. though now it was considered evidence. The chief's authorization would be required for anything further. As evening descended, a sleek black SUV arrived at Redwood Hills, carrying none other than Chief Adamma Bakare himself. The moment he stepped out, residents gawked from their windows. The wealthy magnate, dressed in a crisp, tailored suit, strode up to Tun's damaged home with a solemn expression. Security details fanned out, blocking onlookers from approaching. Tun stood at the doorway, feeling an unsettling mix of shame and relief. "Tund," the chief said, his tone subdued, "I came as soon as I heard." Tund bowed his head, gesturing for the chief to enter. "Please come in, sir." Inside, the chief surveyed the chaos, the boarded-up window, the smashed furniture, Zainab's tear-streaked cheeks. He exhaled heavily, sinking into a rickety chair. "Are you both all right?" Tund cleared his throat. "We're shaken, but we'll be fine. The intruders were from the mansion, sir. Kwesi, Musa, and Bassi. They wanted the suitcase." A flicker of anger crossed the chief's eyes. "I should have known. Greed has many faces." He gestured for Tun to hand him the suitcase. With a deft flick of his wrist, the chief input a numerical code into the padlock. The latches released, and he opened the lid to reveal bundles of crisp dollar bills, bands stacked meticulously, each bundle marked with 100 by 100 USD. The sum was staggering. Tund had never seen so much money in his life. His jaw dropped, and Zainab gasped softly from across the room. Tund's gaze flickered from the money to the chief. "Sir, is that?" $1 million, Chief Adamma confirmed grimly. "I needed to test something, Tund. I've had too many betrayals in my life. I wanted to see if you'd be tempted or if you'd remain loyal." He shook his head as he saw Tund's eyes fill with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "I never intended for anyone to get hurt. I placed it in your home because I thought if you were trustworthy, everything would be safe. I assumed that even if rumors spread, my security protocols would suffice to protect you. I was wrong." Zainab's voice trembled with anger. "You put our lives at risk for a test? Bassi is in the hospital. Who knows if he'll survive?" The chief's face darkened. "I will ensure his medical bills are paid, and I'll compensate all of you for what you've suffered. But you must understand, Zainab, my life is not simple. There are always people trying to exploit me. I had to be sure Tund wasn't one of them." Tund felt a surge of emotions, loyalty, betrayal, confusion, and gratitude all at once. "Chief, I've served you faithfully for 10 years. Did you really doubt me so much that you had to endanger my family?" Chief Adamma lowered his gaze. "It's not about doubting you. It's about doubting human nature. I've learned the hard way that trust is easily broken. But you have proven me wrong, and I see that now." A tense silence filled the battered living room. Beyond the door, night sounds hummed, distant motorcycles, the chatter of curious neighbors. For a moment, it seemed as though the danger had passed, that the tragedy had reached its climax with the arrests. But fate had one final twist waiting. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed outside. Tund and Zainab flinched, while Chief Adamma's security detail scrambled to respond. Shouts erupted in the street. Tund rushed to the doorway, only to witness a horrific scene. Captain Zhao lay sprawled on the ground, blood seeping through his uniform. Beside him stood a trembling figure, a gun in hand, Kwesi. He must have overpowered one of the policemen during transit or seized an opportunity to escape. The madness was not over. Chaos ignited once more. Chief Adamma's security team drew their weapons. Kwesi, eyes wild with panic, swung the gun toward them. "Back off," he screamed. "I lost everything because of that stupid suitcase." Tund felt the world slow down to a crawl. He edged forward, heart thudding in his chest. "Kwesi, please, don't do this." But fear and desperation twisted Kwesi's features into a mask of rage. "I had nothing," he yelled, tears streaming down his face. "I needed that money. Now Bassi is dying and Musa is in jail. We just wanted a chance at a better life. You think the chief pays us enough to survive? Do you?" Chief Adamma stepped forward, hands raised in a calming gesture. "Kwesi, put the gun down. We can talk about this. I'll take care of you and your family." "Lies." Kwesi spat, voice shaking. All you care about is your test, your money. You never cared about us. In one blurred motion, Kwesi swung the weapon to point at the chief, then at Tund. Panic seized Tund as he realized he was only a few steps away from the line of fire. Security guards yelled for Kwesi to drop the gun, but the tension was a lit fuse. Tund lunged forward, hoping to knock the firearm aside. 2 shots rang out in quick succession, reverberating through the night air. For a moment, Tund wasn't sure if he had been hit. He tumbled to the ground, clutching his arm. Pain flared, blood leaking through his shirt sleeve. Distantly, he heard Zainab screaming. When he looked up, he saw Kwesi collapsing, struck by the return fire from the guards. The gun fell from his hand, skittering across the pavement, and he lay still, eyes unseeing. For several seconds, the street was filled with the echo of gunfire and the ragged breathing of the wounded. Captain Zhao moaned in pain, pressing his hand to his abdomen, while Tund's blood pooled around his elbow. Zainab rushed to Tund's side, tears streaming down her face. Chief Adamma stood stunned, the color drained from his features, as he stared at Kwesi's lifeless body. Paramedics and police arrived in a flurry of sirens. Tund was loaded into an ambulance alongside Captain Zhao. Both men were in critical condition, though Tund's wound seemed less life-threatening. Chief Adamma, trembling with shock, cradled his suitcase of money in his arms, like a bitter token of all that had gone wrong. Neighbors looked on in horror as they realized the quiet Redwood Hills had become a battleground for greed and survival. In the days that followed, the aftermath reverberated through the city. Newspapers ran front-page stories dissecting Chief Adamma's loyalty test, painting it as a reckless gambit that cost 2 men their lives. Bassi, sadly, did not survive his injuries and left others severely wounded. Public opinion turned sharply against the chief, accusing him of valuing money over human life. Protests erupted outside Bakar Tower, with citizens demanding better wages and working conditions for domestic staff. From his hospital bed, Tund watched the coverage on a small television, pain and sorrow etched into his every breath. His arm was bandaged, and doctors said he would recover with time. Zainab stayed by his side, relief mingling with anger and sadness. Captain Zhao, likewise hospitalized, was in unstable condition. When Chief Adamma finally visited Tund at the hospital, he was a shadow of his former self. Gone was the confident magnate who strutted through the corridors of power. Instead, he stood, shoulders sagging, clutching a bouquet of flowers. "Tund," he said softly, "I've come to apologize. I never meant for any of this to happen." Tund, weak but alert, looked at the man he had once admired. Memories flooded his mind, years of loyal service, the test that nearly destroyed him, the bullet wound he now bore. He took a shaky breath. "You wanted to test my loyalty," he murmured. "You've got your answer. But at what cost?" Chief Adamma set the flowers on the side table, tears brimming in his eyes. "I'm ending all these tests. I'll pay for your medical bills, compensate the families of those who died, and ensure you never have to want for anything again. I'm so sorry, Tund." But Tund only closed his eyes, the weight of grief pressing him down. Money couldn't revive Bassi or undo the trauma. No amount of compensation would erase the memory of Kwesi's desperate eyes, or the bullet that ripped through Tund's flesh. And what of Captain Zhao, clinging to life due to a job that pitted him against the greed of others? In a hushed tone, Zainab spoke for them both. "We appreciate your help, Chief, but forgiveness won't come so easily. Some tragedies can't be undone." Chief Adamma nodded slowly, tears rolling silently down his cheeks. Outside the hospital window, the African sun glared, bright and indifferent. Life carried on beyond those walls, with commerce, traffic, and the relentless hustle of Lusaka Falls. But inside that room, the tragedy's echoes lingered, a suitcase of money that revealed the darkest corners of human desperation, a test that ended in bloodshed and heartbreak. The shocking and unexpected end to the Millionaire's loyalty test was no triumphant revelation, but a sobering lesson. Greed, suspicion, and desperation could transform the simplest of households into a battlefield, and even the most loyal hearts could be scorched by the flames of mistrust. In the modern African cityscape where wealth often towered over the underpaid many, the tragedy would serve as a grim reminder: true loyalty could not be forced or manufactured, and testing it with dangerous bait was a gamble that no fortune could justify. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.